I'm Mahdi Shaheeb Sher. My website is www.mahdishaheebsher.com. I think one of my interests in the world as Mahdi Shaheeb Sher is kind of some of the Asian invasions we've had in the world. I think with Asia, I think one of the remarkable Asian invasions we've had in Asia is with the Persian Empire. I think when you look at the Persian Empire, it's one of the first empires in world history. So I think that's what the Persian Empire is seen as, the first great empire in the world. I mean, again, Persia has Asia in its name. It's part of Asia Minor in Persia. But I think the Persian Empire stretched from the whole region of Persia, the Middle East, right into Greece and Egypt as well. And I think it dominated more of a territory with the circumference and sphere surrounding that land empire as well. So I think that the Persian Empire is a good example of an Asian invasion of Europe. I think it's kind of seen as Asian culture at its best, where you do see kind of a flowering of literature and culture that's Asian and Persian. But the significance of the Persian Empire is that it lasted for over 1,000 years. I think it had the Assyrians, the Abbasids, and maybe the Scythians as well. So there were a lot of components of the Persian Empire, and they had mass armies all over the Middle East, especially into Greece as well. But the culture of the Persian Empire is pretty much what we see in the world today. I think the legacy of the Persian Empire is what we see in the world today, with things like schools and hospitals and maybe some roads as well. I think the Persians were the first to invent schools and hospitals and maybe roads as well, through deserts and things. I think they also invented a lot of cultivation as well, so irrigation. I think that's Persian influence. But a lot of the modern day philosophy that we have, I think, comes from Persian education, from Persian schools and academies, and from Persian scholars and guides who perhaps laid the first basic questions about some of the things that we take for granted. I think they were the first to ask some of the basic questions that people are asking at the moment when it comes to philosophy and things. So I think that the Persians were very curious about the world around them, and they did debate for the first time some of the more important truths about the world, some of the most important maybe teachings and commandments maybe, or maybe the values, some of the most important values that should be kind of looked at. So I think that's what the Persian legacy is in the world, kind of Persian education. And I think most of the modern European philosophers, such as maybe Hobbes, Nietzsche, and Robespierre, and maybe some of the other ones, Karl Marx, and the other ones, draw a lot of their ideas and discussions about philosophy, not through their own origins of ideas or idea, but through what they've read about from other books, and then they've asked questions based on what they've read about. So I don't think they have their own questions and ideas as independent philosophers. I think what these European philosophers have done is simply read a lot of books. I think it's called the incoherence of the philosophers. I think they've read a lot of books, and I think they've asked questions, and some people have determined that these are their ideas, even though those questions have come from other philosophers and other books and other countries. So I think a lot of European philosophy originates from places like Egypt, Persia, China, and maybe other countries that have wise men who have perhaps first asked some very fundamental questions that might rise above the limited imagination of most Europeans. So I think that's what it is. And I think that with these fundamental ideas and questions, I think European imaginations have been awakened into some kind of cognition of thought that has kind of come up to date with what the world has come to understand about the world. And I do think that the world has been more advanced than the rest of Europe traditionally by its history. I think if you look at the history of Europe, it's always lagged behind the rest of the world. And I think it's only when you go into the Middle Ages, after Alexander the Great had to conquer half of Asia, that Europe had some room to breathe. And I think when we moved into the Middle Ages, we had some kind of development of some of the basic concepts that existed around the world, and that kind of brought that up with maybe some of their own questions, not so much their own understanding about those values and things, but maybe some of their own questions. And that has been given some kind of input and credit. It's been given some accreditation and credit. So the fact that these Europeans asked some questions, it kind of introduced the European perspective on the rest of the world and its ideas. And that's kind of introduced its kind of, I think it's introduced the worldview about European ideas, about its value of music and dance, and maybe companionship and wine, about maybe what type of food they like, their fascination with fashion, which seems to be paramount in their culture. I think their fascination with fashion is quite an interesting aspect of European culture. I don't think that exists anywhere else in the world as much as it does with Europe, but that is quite an interesting thing about Europeans, its fascination about fashion. And I think the other things is that it does like to kind of engage in luxury behaviour, and that is kind of sitting down, enjoying music and wine. I think the culture of Europeans is very aristocratic, in their like to kind of enjoy the luxury of life because of their frailty of life. I think most Europeans might not have the strong mind, body or biology as the rest of the world. I think Europeans do have a different diet and a different landscape of terrain and environment. And I think they do have maybe a frailty within their own biology. And I think that's probably why we see a lot of behaviour leaning towards luxury rather than other pursuits such as learning, thinking, physical endeavour and conduct, perhaps building and conducting themselves in the world. I like that word. I think conducting yourself in the world should be more important than any fascination with luxury. And I think when there is a condition of fascination with luxury, then it kind of introduces ease and squalor. And I think that that's what Europe could be known for with its history and culture. its kind of fashion, with its interesting fashion and luxury. So I think that's reflected in a lot of their literature. When you read things like Candide or Don Quixote or Count of Monte Cristo or kind of Voltaire or the other stories of Europe, literature, you do get this fascination of easiness in the world that's conducted in a pursuit of pleasure, and the same with art as well. A lot of their art is based around flowers and portraits of people that they might think are noteworthy or typical of their environment, perhaps noteworthy. So I think that's what European art is kind of developed with these things. And I think they display a lot of other kind of colour and kind of cubes and squares and circles and things to try to incorporate the pleasure and entertainment of art. But most importantly, I think that the Europeans are known for their kind of merchant investment in art. I think that we have had the development of the merchant class in Europe, and I think it's because of that merchant class that we've had a flowering of European art in Europe. And I think that that's why we see some kind of art as it's characterized in Europe, and maybe it's merchant class and the artists that they employ. But I think that it is primarily a display of wealth. I think that's what European art is. It's a display of wealth, rather than a concoction or some kind of a vision of what the world actually is around people or around individuals. I think that could be an alternative art to European art. But I think that European art is often more of a display of wealth, especially with its merchant class. So we don't so much see kind of the icons or the stereotypes that exist within the world, what moves the world and its people. We don't see those things as much with European art. I think it's more of what people expect with the display of wealth. It's a showcase of wealth with fruit bowls and with kind of jars of flowers, or with portraits of the merchant class and its nobility. It's with horses as well in particular. I think that's a big display of wealth. So we see those displays of wealth within European art, and it's with soldiers as well, and maybe some battles and other things. So I think that's one of the interesting things about Europe. Thank you very much.